There are a lot of actors, entertainers, and musicians who claim to be Christians, yet they play roles or sing songs that include or even seem to highlight questionable content like foul language, violence, and sex or nudity. Is this appropriate or acceptable for Christian entertainers? Does this hurt their witness or the witness of the church at large? Where should they draw the line, and how do we defend Christianity when someone questions the validity of our faith because of questionable content that comes from creators who claim to be Christians? We're going to discuss this and much more on today's episode of the DudeFax podcast.
Let's get it.
Welcome to the DudeFax podcast. We're four guys that are united by a love for coffee, Jesus, and corny jokes. In the past, we all served in ministry together. In the present, we create podcasts to help you get through your week. And in the future, we aspire to be the granddad that teaches his grandkids to pull his finger. So if you love Java, Jesus, and dad jokes, you're going to fit right in. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy this week's episode of the DudeFax podcast.
Okay, Dimitri Martin said, this is a terrible way to start part two. He said he likes to carry one of those miniature cocktail umbrellas and on a rainy day pull it out and hold it over his head. And people will be like, what's wrong with you? He says, well, just to warn you, there's a wizard around the corner. This was huge and I was Asian. This is a joke.
Dimitri Martin.
Yeah, welcome
He's
to
so
part
funny.
2. Glad you're here. We are actually going to be talking about entertainers like Dimitri Martin, but unlike Dimitri Martin, because I don't know where he stands in his faith, if he has it.
I think he's Greek Orthodox, I think.
Okay, there you go. We're talking about entertainers. Say again.
I said it fits.
It fits. Actors, musicians, creators that say that they're Christians, but aren't necessarily Christian in what they do, as far as they're not on Christian movies or, they're not Christian artists per se, but, they're in Hollywood, they're producing things, and they claim to be Christian, whatever that might be. That's a wide term, I think, to a lot of people, or they claim to follow God, or they believe in him, but produce some content that we might not say is becoming of a believer. And the thing that got us thinking about this topic and what should the line or the standard be there was an article that came out just a few days ago from the website My Charisma, and they have an article about Alan Ritchson, who plays Jack Reacher in the television show Reacher. Is that Netflix? Amazon Prime?
Amazon, yeah.
Yeah. So, because in that, I'm not going to go too far, but in that, there's some things that he does or participates in that has ruffled some feathers because he claims to be a believer, and he actually has an online ministry. Jeff shared this with us. So, Jeff, you want to give us some more input about that article and what was being discussed there?
Sure. So on My Charisma, there's an article, and the title is "Should a Christian Actor Participate in a Nude Love Scene?" So it's actually referencing another article by Kelsey Dallas in the Deseret News, who asked, "Can you be a Christian and play a sinful character on TV?" So Alan Ritchson, the star of Reacher, he has caught wind of this, and he says, absolutely, you can. And he's expressed that he's unhappy with Christians who have a problem with him taking on what he calls a morally ambiguous role. And he even released a video he's got TikTok and other social media websites, and spoke out about it. He is an outspoken, unashamed Christian, as he calls himself. But he also says, in response to his Reacher character, I love playing Reacher. I love telling this story. I love playing a character who creates a kind of moral ambiguity that we should struggle against as we consider whether or not what he's doing is good all the time or morally right. I think that kind of thing is fun and fascinating, and I think escaping to that world as an audience hopefully it's as enjoyable for you as it is for me to help bring it to life. And then he adds, but it's funny to me how a lot of people criticize me, supposed Christians especially criticize me for playing Reacher, as if the only TV that should exist is seeing people silently folding their hands in the pew of a church. I mean, what kind of stories are we supposed to tell? And this is him asking the question. So it's an interesting topic, and he says some interesting things. Even though, as we were talking about earlier, I don't know if he ever really fully head on addresses the questions that were asked of him, but he does sort of seem to dance around the point of, hey, like, I'm a Christian, but why can't I play sinful characters and be in movies or TV shows that have characters that obviously are involved with sin or struggling through what normal human beings struggle through. Um, you know, I think his point is I don't want to have to just be on like Christian Hallmark movies or Kirk Cameron shows. Like I want to be out there playing, more what he would probably think of as complex characters. And and I think he would even go as far to say in some of his other videos that I've seen that, this is, he feels like he connects more with people who need Christ in that line of work than he would, say, being a Kirk Cameron type, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in that his response video, he actually went to scripture, and one thing that he did, he talked about the first few verses of the Bible, beginning of Genesis 1, that God created the heavens and the earth. And by listening to his video, he talked about and Grant, I know you'll remember the Hebrew words for um, um, heaven and earth. Do you remember?
Haaretz. Haaretz is earth, I believe.
Something. Well, he quoted these two Hebrew words,
The
and
earth.
I forget exactly where it is. And the way he did so, I was like, oh, he listens to the Bible Project or Tim Mackey. And then I saw another one of his videos is from, they talk about Tim Mackey. And so we've talked about the Bible Project here. So he's learning Hebrew, at
They're in
least Hebrew
Portland.
background. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But he used that to talk about how God is very creative and that he was bringing, I thought where he was going to go. He started talking about, oh, it's the word, I'm sorry,
Create, probably, right?
not
Bereshit,
for
bara,
create.
Elohim.
No, it's the second verse that he was talking about
Oh.
the waters, where it talks about being chaotic. But anyways, he was saying, I thought he was going with, when I'm acting in these roles, I'm bringing this order out of chaos. It's chaotic, it's sinful, but I'm trying to show or have an opportunity to reach people. But he never quite got there. What he did, though, was talk about how when we read scripture, we see all the avenues that God used to reveal who he was. And specifically in the Old Testament, we see killing and we see wars and we see um, these types of things occur, violence, stuff like that, that and acts of sinful people, all that God used to try to reveal who he is. Which I can see where he's going there. But I appreciate him addressing it and at least taking the opportunity to have a conversation. And we're not just here to rail on him or talk about Reacher, but in general, is there a line there for entertainers who claim to be Christians, followers of Jesus, or at least claim to believe in God and want to follow God? Is there a line there for the things that they can produce? So we got to talking about some other entertainers who claim to be Christian, and we shared some of these. But there's an article that just lists about 40 here, and it's very loose. I'll just share some that we'll know, and then we can fill in the gaps. Candace Cameron Bure, no one really pays attention to her stuff unless you're into cheesy Christianized Hallmark movies. Patricia Heaton, who I love from Everybody Loves Raymond and The Middle. I know she's been an outspoken believer, but even there, there's some things in the stuff she's created. I think she's hilarious. Tom Hanks, Greek Orthodox. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban are saying that they're raised Catholic. Jane Fonda, Mark Wahlberg claims to be a follower of God. Carrie Underwood.
He met his wife at a Catholic service, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
At a
Okay.
mass. I think he met his wife at a mass. Or their first date was a mass or something like that.
Because you're talking about Mark Wahlberg or
Yeah.
Carrie
Mark-
Underwood's husband?
Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, Mark Wahlberg.
Mark
Okay.
Wahlberg. Not the failed Nashville Predators.
Yeah, because I was
wannabe
thinking he was a hockey player.
Sucky player.
Do what?
Nothing.
No, okay. We'll keep going. Stephen Colbert is on this list,
Mhm.
which,
He's Catholic as well.
yeah, he has a statement here. He says, ultimately, us all being mortal, the faithful win out in the end, but I certainly hope when I get to heaven, Jesus has a sense of humor, which I think he does.
He Stephen Colbert actually talks about his faith regularly, like on his show. Like he brings it up in his conversations when he's talking to other celebrities and stuff, which I
Okay.
always find pretty
Yeah.
interesting to hear just his perspective.
Hugh
Somebody in
Jackman.
Hollywood.
Let's see, Reba McEntire, Denzel Washington, Dennis Quaid, and he was in I Can Only Imagine, the story of the dude from Mercy Me.
Oh, I thought that was about daydreaming.
That's the part 2.
Oh.
I Can Only Imagine again. Faith Hill, Tim McGraw, Brad Paisley, The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Tim Tebow is in this list. Nick Jonas,
What?
Chance the Rapper, Reese Witherspoon, Garth Brooks. Let me just name these off. Tyler
By the
Perry.
way, the Chiefs won
Oh,
Boo.
35-17.
Sorry, guys. Well, it looks like the conspiracy is no more.
Yep.
The Biebs.
Justin Biebs. He's been going to Hillsong, right? He's been involved
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
heavily.
Who's going to tell him Jehovah's not a real name for God? It's made up. Is anyone going to tell him?
Who Biebs?
I'll do it. Yeah, the Biebs. Or I guess he didn't say Jehovah. He's saying Jireh, right?
Yeah.
Jireh is a Hebrew word. Jehovah's not.
Matthew McConaughey. All right. And Kanye. I think we all know
I knew that
Kanye.
one.
Jesus Walks.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
He did
Steve.
put out a gospel album. Yeah,
I think he did.
Yeah.
it was interesting.
College dropout.
Yeah. Steve Harvey. Selena Gomez. Chuck Norris.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a win for the home team.
Oh yeah.
I know. I actually went to a dinner in Dallas for a prison ministry meeting, where people that are prison chaplains and stuff. And I sat at a table next to Chuck Norris. So
Yeah.
he was there. He was actually one of the keynote speakers.
Did he pray for his food?
No, I just remember he was really short.
Yeah. He's oddly short.
Super short dude.
He probably prayed for the cow before he karate chopped it to death before chopping it into burger meat.
The cow probably just laid over and died on his plate.
I'm done.
Mr. T. He pities the fools
Yes.
who aren't believers.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
That's right. And Ben Affleck, MC Hammer, and Stephen Baldwin. He is considered the Jesus freak of Hollywood, apparently. So there's just some that were on this list. Do you guys know of anyone else that?
Chris Pratt is very outspoken about
Yeah.
his faith. In fact, he's said things in acceptance speeches at award shows about his faith and about Jesus specifically. So it's not just one of those generic, I thank God, but he's specifically referenced having a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. I'm talking about Jesus of Nazareth.
Or Jesus.
Or Jesus.
Actually,
Tijuana.
Of
as a
Houston.
side note, you guys know those epic
Tejas.
birthday songs I send to you guys?
Yes.
Side note, every listener should look up their name, epic birthday, and then your first name. And for Christmas with the girls, we started a tradition a couple years ago where every Christmas we listen to Epic Birthday Jesus. It's your birthday today, Jesus. It's great.
Yeah, so there are a lot out there. and all of these, they're all human, so they're all sinners. Um, and I kind of had to chuckle at one thing that Alan Richardson said in his response, where people are upset about him playing roles of someone who's a sinner. I'm like, well, everyone is. So, I mean, good luck choosing, unless you're playing Jesus. And I think that Caviezel has the market cornered on that one. But
A little bit.
yeah, so they're all gonna they're all gonna have opportunities presented to them, or maybe an expectation out there that their content might be questionable at some point. Um, so what do you guys think about that? What really should we expect of people who claim to be Christians that are in these roles? And let's just go with this specific example of Reacher, where one of the main things was like there's a lot of violence in that, a lot of language, and I guess there's some nudity in it. Based
His
off of I think
butt,
what that
if you
said.
consider that nudity.
It's his butt. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, we have VidAngel, and when we watch something like that, I'll take away like all the female nudity. But if it's like a guy's butt, I'm like, Bridget, I'll throw you a bone. You can. You can.
So you could
Throw you a
choose
bone or
on
throw you a
VidAngel?
butt?
Yeah, VidAngel is
You can
awesome.
choose male versus female
Yeah.
nudity.
Yeah, so basically,
Interesting.
if you guys haven't used that, it's amazing. It's $10 a month. They need to sponsor us, because I will talk high of them all the time.
People might need to use them when they're watching our podcast.
They might have to. There
I
may
see
be some
Grant's
things.
butt.
There's going to be a lot of childish humor tagged
Yeah.
in ours, but that's basically what they do.
Hey, what happened to
Oh,
Grant?
there goes Grant. They'll go through, like, they've got content from Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV,
It's weird.
and movie shows, and they've gone through and they've created all these filters, and they're very specific with them. But all the language, childish humor, innuendo, and then if it gets into sexual elements or nudity, it's either male or female. They'll split that out. If it's statues and paintings, there's a category for that. So you can preset your filters to where if there's female nudity, it's always edited out. Or you can choose from episode to episode. And one of the absolute best things, if you don't get it from anything else and you're okay hearing all the language, watching all the stuff, you can edit out the credits. That's right.
Ooh.
So it just automatically, if they're front end credits, end scene credits, gone. And so if there's a movie that has end scene after the credit scenes, you just skip right to it.
Oh.
So
Does
That's
it
a great thing.
replace?
I don't
cuss
care about who
words
made this.
with like really funny words,
like Mother Fudger
yeah.
in there.
Mr.
was-
Falcon.
Get the
Mr.
fuck
Falcon.
out of here.
Forget your mother. Forget your brother.
Unfortunately, no, because that would make it even better. Maybe that's the pro level. Instead of paying
Yeah.
10 a month, it's 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just removes it. So, but anyways, let's get to this question. There's a role that includes all of those, and a Christian entertainer is asked to play that role. Should they? Should they not? And where's the line there? What do y'all think?
Well, I thought it was interesting in this article, My Charisma, that the author, and I don't want to completely speak for them because they didn't really dive into it too much, but didn't seem to have a problem so much with the fact that Reacher was violent. He kills a lot of people. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Reacher, just about every episode he's killing like 20 dudes. So it's violent. He doesn't use a lot of language, but he'll have some language in there. But the author of the article doesn't really reference that, but specifically references the nudity. And it's not even so much the nudity, it's the sex that happens between him and one of the characters. And talks a lot about it, even equating it to porn and going down those lines. And I don't necessarily want to dive into that. But what I think is funny is that we're sort of willing sometimes to accept certain sinful acts in that regards in our entertainment. We even do it. We've talked about this on the podcast before. We even do it with the stuff that we might watch or not watch, or you might use it with your VidAngel, Josh, and the fact that you might edit out nudity, but hey, you're gonna watch people blow each other's heads off. It's interesting that we do that because I think part of it is we have to ask ourselves: are we sort of dismissive of certain sins, but not others? But I think as an actor or somebody who's in entertainment being asked to do those things, it's really asking yourself at the end of the day, is this the way that I'm going to most honor Christ in what I'm doing? And ask yourself that question. I don't know if I can give you a straight like yes or no in, you know, every scenario, but I would tend to think that as somebody in Hollywood, true, you can reach a lot of people, um, and be in circles that obviously need Jesus. But if that person is too much like everyone else, when do we see what makes us stand out as believers? The difference, the fact that we are taking up our cross and following after Jesus, that we serve Him, that He is our master, that it is not ourselves, because that industry, not only that industry, but a lot of entertainment is very self-service, or it's done for self-promotion or to be seen, and I think you have to be very careful in that regards. I'm not here to say like, yeah, you can do this, but you can't do that. But I do think it's got to be weighed and obviously considered, because I think it can be something that harms your witness as a Christian.
I think that it's something that is probably a different line for everybody. I think it's up to your own personal conviction in the matter, and what you're doing and what your goal is to do with your working. If you're I've talked before about how I think honesty in art is important, and humanity, being a human, it's messy. It's not always clean cut, nice, and you know everything's roses. Like, so to be honest in our art is okay, and to bring forth things that are not necessarily the best, but I think it's how you do it and what your end goal is with what you're doing that really determines that. And if you can sit there and honestly say, like, the as an actor, in his case, like, if he's sitting there and thinking what I'm doing and what I'm portraying is ultimately like for a greater purpose, and I'm trying to say something with that, then I think that's okay if that's what he's decided and what he's personally felt convicted and prayed with um, and figured out. So it's not an easy question, I don't think. It's just like taking these things in as believers. It's something that you have to do prayerfully and considerately.
49ers just scored.
Good. Amen.
Grant, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is entertainer. I hardly know her.
So the first thing we need to do is probably get Grant off the podcast if you're concerned.
VidAngel just flagged that one.
Yeah, that's right. Childish humor. I think we're having trouble.
I don't know. It's tough.
Grant, are you still there?
Yeah, I see
Okay,
him.
there he is. All right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there's some weirdness happening. All I heard was
Yeah.
juke.
For some reason, it keeps freezing on my end, and then all of your audio will catch up really rapidly. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think about examples of people who had a platform. This one's interesting because he sought the platform. He wants to be a commercial actor. And just think about how small this guy is in the scheme of Hollywood history. I mean, how many white males are there in action roles? I mean, thousands at this point. So there's always this fight to be relevant. And I think this is his chance to like get a little more noise, because who cares about your platform? But I think about like was it Eric Little who was in Chariots of Fire? Or like the runner, the Olympic runner
Eric
who like,
Liddell.
I mean, he stood up for one of his convictions, right? And I disagree with it personally because He refused to run on Sunday, calling it the Sabbath, and that's not the Sabbath. But he stood on his conviction. He felt the Lord laid it on his heart to not do something like that on a day of rest. And because of that, he still has a witness, and he's long dead. I mean, people are still sharing his story about obeying the Lord and seeing what the Lord can do through simple obedience. And so I think about that, and that's challenging. I don't know. I personally also wrestle with Jesus, what he says in Matthew 7 about judging and you'll be judged in the same way. But that's also in the paragraph where he talks about plank eye. And we are told to remove the plank out of our own eye so that we can then help our neighbor with the speck in his eye. So, yeah, I think you're right with our vices, because we might say, oh, that's terrible that he showed his booty, yet we're glorifying all the bromance of killing a bunch of people. So I think we have to check ourselves first and watch how we judge others. But also, I don't know, it might, what an opportunity that would have been if he refused to get nude for that. Because there's many actors and actresses who have clauses like that. Like they'll not, it's known that they will not act that way. And a lot of them are secular too. They're not doing it because they're standing on Christian principle. They just will not get naked for Hollywood's sake. And I think that's pretty commendable. And also, I'll leave you with this. Is he that great of an actor if he can't act like he's naked? Can
Do
he
that
just
all the
pretend he's
time.
naked?
Yeah, for real.
I do that in my clothes every day. I pretend like I'm naked. I'm doing it right now. Here's my pickle.
So there's actually a group that I like a lot from Nashville, Judah and the Lion, and saw them in concert.
They have one hit. You like them,
I
Jeff?
do, yeah. But I saw them last year with another group called Colony House. Colony House. They're the sons of Stephen Curtis Chapman. They're not really a Christian
Yeah, they're a Nepo band.
but they're
Their dad built a venue just so they could have shows.
That's
They
right.
stink.
well this was at the Ryman, so but anyways, packed house, Judah and the Lion open for 'em, and Judah and the Lion, Judah claims to be a believer and talks a lot about it. But if you listen to some of his songs, in fact, he's got a song called Beatitudes, but in the song he says the F word. And I remember there's a lot of backlash about that. Also, older band, Caedmon's Call. You guys remember those guys? Derek Webb, who is kind of all over the place, like with his faith and politics and everything. And it seems like every year he's thinking something different. So I don't know if he's like the person who's like the model Christian per se, as far as consistency in his faith, but he's claimed to be Christian and follow Jesus. And even before he's had some sort of different radical beliefs, he would use words in his music. And I remember there being a lot of debate about it, but the way that he used certain words, and I won't use them on here. VidAngel will, blur them out. But he would use certain words to describe things, and sort of to your point, Ryan, like in a very, it was almost like an artist choosing to use that word to drive a point home, and it wasn't. I never felt like he did it, gratuitously or in a way where he's just trying to get this word in, but it was more about, hey, this is the reality of the situation. And I always felt kind of torn about that, because I thought, on one hand, I appreciate his honesty, and I can respect what he's singing about and what he's trying to communicate. On the other hand, I thought, does it do harm? Are there people out there who are like, I'm not going to choose to listen to this? Or is it just that there's a select group of, staunch Christians that are going to be like, well, he said a bad word, I'm not going to listen to this. And that's really the only audience that he's alienating.
I feel like with times like that, that's often the people that find it offensive are the people that are looking for that. I feel like a non-believer would hear that and be like, oh, he said that, like, and he claims to be Christian. He's gonna, he's not trying to put on this face of like being something more than the rest of us, who might have varying vocabularies, but I don't know if that's like an across the board thing. It can definitely be different, but I think oftentimes you'll find that the people that are going to be loud about something like that are people that it was not intended for, and that are just
Well,
trying to
I
lay their own sense of morality onto another believer. But like language is an
well, and
interesting thing
my
because I
problem with that.
personally go ahead, Grant. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Sorry with the
Yeah, the
all these
delay, it's kind
chops
of
in our
odd.
audio
But
is so hard.
I'll just say that when it comes to language, I personally am a big proponent of, I could care less most of the time about the words somebody says. I care more about the attitude of their heart. And I think that is much more important in those situations. Like, if he's using that to make a point, and it's not just saying a curse word flippantly for shock value or something like that. It actually has some meaning behind it. I think that is much more beneficial than just to be have a dirty mouth for the sake of it, just to be cool and edgy. So there's
Yeah.
some nuance there, definitely.
See, and that's why I don't like the language, because I feel like the people that do, especially believers, it's the low hanging shock value that, oh, I can get an audience back, or I can gain an audience by being controversial. Because I feel like personally, I'm never offended when other people use language, but I find it unintellectual and lazy often.
Shut the front
Um,
I was worried there for a second.
yeah. so like, so like Jeff, you mentioned Caedmon's Call. I remember their hits because they were on the radio in the 90s. And when we were in the car with my mom, that's what's going to be on is 90s Christian radio. But they probably did that after their peak to probably entice some more viewership. And that's why I view it as lazy. And that's why, like Ryan, I do care about the heart. Why did you choose to use that language? Were you so attention hungry as an artist? You went after the lowest hanging fruit for believers, language in music, to be stimulating. It's like the artist during my time at Austin P. This guy got out of he did one deployment, or not one deployment. He was enlisted, I think, for 4 years. Got out of the army, used his GI Bill to study art at Austin P. And he deep fries an American flag to make a statement. He knew he would just get attention. That's why he did it.
I bet it tasted
He's not
horrible
selling
too.
art, but he was in the Leaf Chronicle.
You know,
I just view it as lazy.
I have a battle because I love legalism, and I was raised with it, and yeah, thanks. I do need some help with it, but when this question is first posed to me, I'm like, okay, well, you can probably do these things, but don't ever do these things. And again, like, why do I put those lines where I put them? But on the other end, I think if you're Jack Reacher and someone has stabbed you in the gut with a knife, and he's always going to survive whatever happens. But if he's like, "Oh, fart," like that doesn't quite communicate probably the emotion of the moment. But here
I would probably laugh.
I would probably laugh at it, like, "Oh, that's so funny." But I want to show you something from VidAngel. I want to share my screen because this is from our account. And let's see. Okay, can y'all see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so when you get into the Reacher show, this is the second season, the different shows, and they have 67 things you can filter out. And then you can go in and kind of pick what all it is. But when you go under profanity, you'll notice I have the F-bomb and the D-bomb. I take damn out of it because I'm worried it's going to be GD. But I'm okay with the female dog. I'm okay with King James donkeys, HE double hockey sticks, Paul saying caca,
Shite.
right? Shiitake. But so there's some things, but even in this, what I might do,
Blasphemy.
there's 14 that I may take out half because I don't want to hear that
filter.
many. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
And yeah, blasphemy, how many times they say God, how many times they say Jesus, how many
Okay,
times they say
that's what that-
Christ. Sexual innuendo, a woman asks a man if he's ever had sex with another woman. Like, it gets very
Well, great. Now you read it. Is that worse than
yeah,
seeing it?
well, still, this is a man can be seen while taking a shower.
What is this, an audiobook?
So but when we get in there, and then even into the graphic, you could take some stuff out. Like, I don't want to see a man spit blood from his mouth, but I don't mind seeing an injury on his face, right? So there's
Spoiler alerts.
there's just all these
Yeah.
yeah, there are spoiler alerts. There's all these. For me, when I would get into something like that, I would pick and choose what I think's okay for me to receive. And honestly, that's where I struggle more, is not so much what should they be doing, but what am I going to watch anyways? Because I feel like if I'm going to say they shouldn't use foul language as a Christian, but I'm okay hearing some, I feel like I've got a double standard there. And I know we've talked about that in a podcast here, like what can we listen to? But going back to my legalist end, I mean, right now I'll say it. I don't think a Christian actor should ever do a nude love scene. I mean, I would just say that and say, no, you can't change my mind on that. You might have a good argument, but I wouldn't listen to it because I'm a legalist at heart. But there's some things there I'd say no. But if you're laying in bed with a female actress and the context shows that you just slept together, well, okay, that's all right. But there's so much there. I think of where we can argue the minutia in it and miss a lot of, well, where are our hearts in it as believers, anyways, and
Consumers.
consumers. Yeah.
I have a question about VidAngel. Do you ever just edit everything out and it starts and then immediately just goes
It
to
ends.
the credits?
I think there are some movies like that. Wolf of Wall Street might be one.
I saw like 15 seconds.
Yeah. There was a scene where he raised the martini glass and then it cuts to the end. So
Well, funny story about that word, in the female dog context, the bitch. So I have a friend, and his son came to him and said, "Dad, did you know female dogs are called bitches?"
I like how
And he's
you're
like, "Yeah, son, that's." I know. Well, that's how
Yeah.
the son talked, and his dad was like, "Yeah, son, that's what they're called." And then he says, "What are no joke?" He says, "What are boy dogs called?" And my buddy goes, "Hose."
Well,
And Ryan,
you
the
just
way-
offended Ryan. He left.
I did.
Ryan's like, see you later.
Having never-ending
I'm out.
camera issues this episode.
Well, the way that his wife found out about this conversation was one day the son is driving with his mom. Says, "Mom,
Oh no.
look at all those bitches and hoes." And she goes, "Excuse me."
Who taught you that? Dad?
That's great parenting.
So yeah, we're gonna apply some filters to this episode. You can go back.
So, going back to, we were talking about Caveman's Call. I went and saw Caveman's Call in concert when I was in seminary. And it was right in the height of their popularity. But at the time, Derek Webb, who's one of the singers, also had a solo album that he released, and he had like 3 songs, and he had a CD of it, and he was giving it away for free. All right, I think he was asking for donations, but he said, "Hey, you can drop off a donation and pick up a CD on the way out. It's just 3 songs from my new solo album." But he went on to explain that in one of his songs, he used the word whore, and then he used the word for an illegitimate child. And I went back and I listened to the song, and
I like the second syllable of that word.
turd.
Tard?
Sure. Sure.
But I listened to the song, and honestly, I could understand why he would use both words and in the context they were used in. Could he have chosen other words? Maybe would have gotten his point across in the same way. I don't know. But it is interesting, and like you were saying, Josh, it's it's one of those things where I remember as a kid asking my parents because I don't know if you were kids, I just thought everybody was a Christian. You see them on TV, they play a nice guy, that guy's got to be a Christian, right? And later you find out, well, that's not the case. But uh, I remember asking my mom, if you're getting paid like $1 million to act in a movie, like you would say a bad word, right? And she was like, no, I would not. I was like, really? Yeah, but you're
Fudge
getting paid
no,
$1
Jeff.
million. I mean, you wouldn't say like a bad word for $1 million.
You wouldn't talk about a donkey for $1 million.
Yeah, like
Come
for
on.
real. But it is. I think in our minds we sort of draw those lines in certain places and not in other places, and we already talked about that a little bit. But I think it goes to like, and as a point I made earlier, is who are we trying to point to with what we do, and even in the art, we want to tell a story and we appreciate it, and obviously God has given us art, but at what point are we worshiping the art itself versus one who created the art? And all questions that I think are relevant to ask ourselves. But for those who are out there, putting art out there, I think at the end of the day, and I think about this, when I see people on social media that are influencers, and obviously they might influence for something. I follow a lot of runners. Josh and Grant, I know you guys like cycling, and people that are out there riding bikes, and you know obviously we all have interest and we follow certain people that do those things, and they're going to call attention to those things, and it's not always going to be Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But at what point um, do we let that drive the train versus our faith drive the train? And I think that's where I have the hang up. And not that I can answer that for every artist that's out there, or am I going to say, well, they're obviously letting the art drive the train and not Jesus. But if I'm in
Yeah.
that situation, I think that's what I'm asking myself. Am I letting running or acting or music be more important than Jesus? And if that's the case, then I need to take a step back and think about the things that I'm doing in this art as I participate in it.
Well, could I segue and talk
Yeah,
about the culinary
please.
arts and something that Paul wrote?
Yes.
Okay, so the only passage I was thinking about today in this was when Paul is talking to the church in Corinth. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and one of the issues in Corinth was some believers were okay eating food that was formerly sacrificed to idols, and some were not. Right? And I kind of think of it the same way, like what are we putting into us media wise? Like what are we putting into us? And it says, so 1 Corinthians 10, starting 23, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. So regarding eating, eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you, and for the sake of the conscience. I do not mean your conscience, but his. For why should my liberty be determined by somebody else's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of that for which I give thanks? So whatever you eat or drink, or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Like you said, Jeff. Give no offense to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything that I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that many, that they may be saved. So, like, hey, if your friend group finds Game of Thrones objectionable, hey, you probably shouldn't push it on them, with or without VidAngel. if you have friends that can't watch something like Reacher because the dude might bring you down a path by watching him call himself a Christian and that's going to offend you and hurt their faith, well, maybe abstain from it. There's always two sides. There's a consumer, and they're making stuff like this where Christians are trying to break their own consciousness or whatever to do the role because people are consuming it.
All right, real quick.
I don't know.
There's 2
it
seconds
interesting.
left in the game. It's tied at 7. 49ers have the ball at like the 8-yard line. 6-yard line.
Come on,
Can't see it
Niners.
on my camera
So
anymore.
here we go.
Let's go 40
they're kicking a
Winers.
field goal. Okay.
Oh,
I think the
timeout.
Lions called a timeout
Try
just
to
to
ice
freeze
the,
them.
the kicker. Yeah.
So
We'll come back.
Ooh, iced him.
We'll come back to the action when they're set and ready to go. As you're mentioning that, it brought up a thought of things that Christians post online. Like when the pet peeves of mine.
Here we go.
Wait, here we go.
there's gonna be another timeout.
Oh, snap, set,
Snaps
kick.
up, and it is.
That's
it's
good.
I think.
They're-
Yeah,
Where are the refs?
that's
down
ball
there?
game.
Oh,
49ers
Oh.
win 10-7.
Man.
oh man.
Okay. All right.
So it's going to be a red Super Bowl is what
Yeah.
we're saying. I dig it.
So kind of off topic, but it'll get to the point here. But something that always, I don't know. I don't want to go too harsh on it, but a lot of times Christians will post publicly about maybe an activity they're involved in or something they're doing that would probably fall into that kind of category of it's something that maybe some people struggle with and others may not. But then I'll hear people like when Game of Thrones came out, we had looked into it and saw that, okay, there's a lot of content here that I'm not going to watch. And it's clearly questionable content, and that's not me trying to say I'm better than anybody else who watched it, but it wasn't for us. But then I would see other believers like post a ton about it. And like, I know you're watching that. And that I struggle with that a little bit. And again, that could be some of the legalism that's in me. Because I think there are other people who are friends of theirs that aren't believers who are going to see this and think, well, where's their standard? Or maybe they struggle with, they've got some sort of sexual addiction, and all the nudity that's in that would be a major trigger for them, but yet their Christian friends are watching it. And yeah, I don't know if you get where I'm coming from on that, but then even when we begin to share what we're being entertained by, is that something we need to be careful about as well?
Well, let me ask a question because of that, Josh. And I think that's a really encouraging thing to say, because you merge that with Paul's language, right? It was against your conscience to watch that show, right? And if I think about like strong believers in my life, you're one of the people I think about. You've been walking with the Lord for a while. You're faithful in ministry. You're faithful to your wife and love your kids and family. Like I feel like you're doing it. And I feel like, especially when we have passages of Paul's when he talks about like a weaker brother, like don't cause a weaker brother to stumble. What about that passage? And the conscience, that has nothing to do with weak or strong. That's a conscience that God has given us to view the world through. And so the question is, I wonder why in our American Christian context, we can't have those types of conversations with those people to say, hey, listen, I can't watch something like that because of my conscience and the Spirit stirring my heart. I can't do that. And however, I respect you, and the fact that you can indulge in that is making me question my conscience. Even just to open up that conversation with believers in our lives. Like I feel like we play this hierarchy game of, well, I can't say that to them because I think they view me as better or further along in my walk or whatever. But I mean, what I wonder what that could do to our relationships in the church to say, hey, that hurts my conscience personally. But the fact that you can indulge in it is making me rethink something I feel like I shouldn't. How should we handle this? And there could be some power there.
It's
I don't know.
again another one of those areas. A lot of there's a lot of black and white in following Jesus. Like he's in charge, he's king. We're not. His way is right, ours is not. He's always good. Any good from us is from him. Like there's things that are clear, but then the daily living out some of those clear truths can be gray and can be
Tricky.
tricky. Um, and so it does take a lot of, I think it begins with us, are we being obedient to what God is telling us, to the convictions that are in our spirit? And are we looking out, as everyone has said, are we looking out for those around us who might still be maturing at a different pace than where we are, whatever that looks like? But are we looking out for that as well? But before we really even act or question Alan Richson, doing some of the things he's doing in Reacher, if he wasn't in that, would we have any issue with the show? Um, and even if he is in it, and I know if I have issues with him, but I'm still going to watch it. Like, does that make me?
Right.
Does that defeat my argument? That. Um,
Yeah.
so I think we
The
have.
consumer, man.
Yeah, I think we have to be fair with that. Like, okay, if I'm going to be okay watching this, I should be okay with the Christian actor acting it. And that may be different for different people with where that is for you, but maybe just setting out a whole line. But then again, I'm still going to like say, no nudie scenes, man. If you're in the shower, okay, all right. And you work out and you got buns of steel and you want to show them off God's creation, go for it. But
Get a spouse for that, okay?
yeah.
I have great appreciation for people that are in the entertainment industry, and they specifically don't necessarily want to fall under that label of like Christian entertainment. A lot of musicians even shy away from being under like a Christian label, or even an actor that's like, hey, I don't want to only act in Christian movies. And if you hear some of those people talk, sometimes they recognize that, hey, I want to be able to reach an audience outside of that Christian bubble. And so I appreciate that, and think there are some people doing some really good things in those realms. And so I think we can also open up that line of thinking too, is should actors or musicians only sing Christian music or only act in Christian movies? And then of course we know, we talked about Christian entertainment and how bad a lot of it is, and who is it really reaching? Is it just reaching the Christians? And we talked about that too. So I think there's a place for it, obviously, and ultimately that's saying like Christian actors or Christian entertainers being in a secular work environment at the end of the day, because that's the case with a lot of people. As God has called people to serve, whether it be in entertainment or whether it be at a factory somewhere, in secular environments, to be the light in those places. And so I think that's a unique opportunity, and I love to see when people do that. But again, it's everything we do is for the glory of God. Are we doing something that is helping us relate more to those people that we're walking to every single day, or are we doing something that is displaying Christ? And I think those are just the questions that we all have to ask. And I think you've asked some good ones, Josh, as you talk about, what does that say about us as the consumer? If we just consume this stuff, I have a problem with it if it's a Christian doing it, but we still go and consume
If
this
there were
stuff.
no market, they wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
It's-
right.
And if there's no market, there wouldn't be a vid angel.
That's right.
So even them, and that's one of my problems I have philosophically with VidAngel is they profit. They are profiting off of the objectionable stuff,
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
because then there would be nothing to edit.
I mean, get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
if everything went Christian and they took all that out, they would be out of business. So they're like,
They
yes,
are
please,
leeches.
please keep creating this. But I love the benefit on my
Trash.
end.
Yeah.
I love the benefit on my end, to watch some things I
Sure.
might not have watched otherwise. And there's no solid right or wrong answer in these things. We may trend a certain way or the other depending on where you are, what your experiences have been. But what Jeff said, I think that's how we kind of wrap the conversation up is, are we honoring God with what we're doing? Whether we're the entertainer or the consumer, is it leading people closer to the Lord or further away? And at the end of the day, you're the one that asks.
Mhm.
You answer to that.
Yeah.
Right. So Alan Richson, yeah, he answers for that. No one else has that for him, and he'll be the one that stands before the Lord. But I also know that this guy has an online ministry called Insta Church, and he's doing a ton of speaking and teaching. I do know this video that Jeff referenced earlier. There's some things that are a little quirky, but overall, it looks like he's trying to communicate the truth of Scripture and of who Jesus is through a unique avenue. And him playing this role of reacher is allowing at least some segment of society to get to know who he is and maybe find that truth in through that. So he'll be the one to answer for that, and then I'm going to answer for what am I being entertained by? What do I choose? And then we go on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
And that's
Go ahead.
I love Jesus' parable about the tax collector and the sinner. Or no, the Pharisee praying with his hands held high on the corner, saying, "Praise God, I'm not like these tax collectors and sinners," right? And then it talks about but there's another man who prayed in quiet, "Have mercy on me, a sinner." And Jesus says, "Surely the second man would leave justified." And so I think it's valuable for Christians, just what we've all been saying. I'm just beating this dead horse by this point, but how is my heart? So who cares about this guy? I've never even heard of Reacher until last week, and it was some article about that. It's probably the same one you guys are referring
It's
to.
a good show.
But who cares about that
You should
dude?
watch it with Ben Angel.
And who cares if I'm better than another person? I'm definitely not. It's not my cup of tea. But what about me? Am I the one in the quiet place saying, "Lord, have mercy on me"? Am I so consumed and concerned about my own repentance that I'm not categorizing and comparing other believers the way I compared football players, whether or not they're kneeling or standing 3 years ago? Who am I?
That's the signal that we have.
The turtle man.
That's all. Speaking of Christians that shouldn't be posting stuff on social media, but I'm very thankful that it got placed there. A lot of laughs. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you want to add? What do you think? Where's the line there? Let us know what you think. We'll share that. We'll add that to our discussion the next time.
We
next
didn't even
week.
get into politicians. What do you think about
Oh man,
people that pander
Ooh.
to Christians, claim to be Christians, and they reference 2 Corinthians?
Oy.
And the thing is, that stuff is all around. I don't know if any of them. Maybe we'll do when we get closer to the election. We can hash some of that out.
The next day we all see each other at church.
So join us again next week, and we will tackle something else.
Let's get it.